All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is David Schmidt, and I'm the Client Strategy and Technology Officer here at Hitachi Vantara, and I focus on object storage solutions. In today's webinar, you'll get a glimpse of how Hitachi Vantara is helping customers modernize their AI infrastructure with our VSP1 object solution, as well as discuss how customers can meet their data lakehouse needs with on-prem object storage today and what it looks like going forward. So with me, I'd like to pass it over to Whit for his introductions.
Sure. Hi, I'm Whit Walters. So I've sat on both sides of the table. I've been a CTO buying the technology, and I've also been an architect that's building the solutions. So this has taught me that real transformation isn't about new tech, but about building foundational strategies for innovation. So as a gig-owned field CTO, I use that as a hands-on perspective in my work as an analyst and speaker, and I help leaders create a durable strategy that turns technology into measurable business results. Ben?
Thank you, Whit. My name's Ben Clifford, and I'm the product management lead for our data management solutions product management team. So we're a team that focuses on cross-portfolio, across the Hitachi Vantara portfolio, to build innovative solutions for Lakehouse, AI, big data, and other kind of data management problems. I've also got over 25 years of experience in IT, spanning from engineering through product leadership, and pre-sales roles. I've also been product owner for Hitachi Object Storage for a number of years. So my focus really is solving complex problems with creative and scalable solutions, building trust through credibility and technical credibility, and having kind of a customer-focused view and on solving customer problems.
Great, thanks, and welcome everybody. So I want to just set the stage a little bit here as we get started. I've also been in storage for a very long time. I've worked at multiple storage vendors and focused on different products, but really object storage has been my niche, my focus for about 10 years now. And I've seen object storage requirements dramatically shift over this time, from storing cold and compliant data for a very long time to a much broader set of requirements. And here today, we're going to talk about lakehouses and how AI-driven businesses are leveraging object storage to really shape and how that shapes the future going forward. So first, I'd like to ask Whit, let's talk about industry trends and business drivers. How are you seeing object storage changing the industry, and what are the big shifts you see in how enterprise approach data lakehouses today? And third, data lakehouse is a vast use case. Are there any specific workloads and sub-use cases that you'd like to see that's driving adoption of object storage?
Wow, a lot there, David. So absolutely. The most profound change we're seeing is that evolution from a secondary archival tier to primary high storage data platforms, especially for demanding modern workloads, especially AI and real-time analytics. So in our research, what we've been seeing is kind of the decisive move from that outdated perception that you were kind of talking about of object storage is just kind of slow and cheap to much more performant. How can we use the things to do much more market-driven components such as all flash, NVMe, some of the scale-outs from media and object storage, making it much more of a viable and often preferred storage media, especially for some of these performance-intensive and mission-critical applications. Secondly, we're also seeing a big convergence in protocols. And that's simplifying some of that enterprise management. And it's no longer just that rigid choice between a file system or an object store. We're now starting that a lot of the platforms starting to converge with some unified access. And they're starting to converge on some of those standards, such as S3 buckets and NFS and SMB. This is a huge benefit, especially for customers, because it now allows them to support a lot of their legacy file-based applications, and then much more of their modern cloud-based native architectures, kind of on that single consolidated infrastructure. Again, we're seeing that with Hitachi and some of the other leading players in the space. And finally, intelligence is everywhere, and it's being pushed down into the storage layer. So object stores are transforming from that passive repository into active with intelligent components in the data pipelines, things like rich queryable metadata, inline data processing, and direct data integration with analytics engines, that are enabling organizations to do much more with their data and be much more efficient and drive much more insight from their data faster and much more easily. That's a lot of the research that we've been doing into the object storage industry itself.
Mhm. Great. Thanks, Whit. I appreciate that insight. And from my customer conversations, I'm finding some of their top priorities is really about modernizing their data platforms and having the ability to adapt to the various object storage workloads, whether it's price optimized or performant requirements, but also trying to handle this growth in unstructured data. So they really have to manage a tremendous amount of data, these large data lake houses, and trying to avoid the silos of data because you want it all together. If it's not all together, then you can't really take advantage of it from an AI perspective. Are you seeing the challenge of trying to balance the innovation and moving forward and quickly at scale, but at the same time trying to balance that with operational stability? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, David. So what we've seen is customers are starting to move away from those old Hadoop-centric HDFS warehouses and data lakes. They were kind of monolithic and they were really, really hard to manage. I don't know if you've ever had stayed up late at night trying to get Zookeeper to play nice with your Hadoop file structure or some of the other pieces. But we're starting to see a lot of that architecture move away from that lock-in from the HDFS-based data lake because we needed the scalability of Hadoop, but that kind of solved Google's problems with HDFS. But what we're finding is it didn't solve everybody else's in all of their enterprise. What worked 20 years ago when Google invented it doesn't work today with what we're seeing with modern kind of lake houses. Because customers are looking for the modern lake house, they're still looking at decoupling compute and storage. And again, this allows organizations to scale out those analytics engines and be able to store things in, but they're also looking for things like high performance and S3 capability. All the hyperscalers have adopted S3 as a protocol, so those all work. But really, we're starting to look back on table formats such as Iceberg and Hudi and Delta Lake. And these formats bring asset transformation, transactions, and schema evolution and time travel capabilities to the data sitting in the object store. They're kind of the smarts that make the Lakehouse possible. And any innovation that we're seeing in that storage layer also simplifies that accelerated interactions with these table formats, such as enabled table support and some big step forwards that we're seeing in the ecosystems all the way around it, like what you're doing with Hitachi and some of your table innovation there.
Are you seeing any specific industries that are leading this charge in lakehouse modernization?
Absolutely. So it's all about AI right now. AI, ML, everything is really starting to drive that forward. And so when we're looking at specific industries, we can talk about just about every single one because everybody's doing it. But we're also seeing um, a lot of media companies are starting to use much more of that because they're looking at I need high scalability and I need to be able to search through this unstructured data, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, cricket, you name it. They're all looking at how can I look at these things, and I need to be able to find yesterday's highlights, whether I'm looking at, hey, tell me about this cricket game and this cricket pitch and a certain player, or if I'm looking at real-time soccer players, or as they would say in Europe, I'm looking at football, which is the same thing here in the US. But they're really looking at how can I use that to find things faster and better. They're also looking at GPU connections because they're looking at some of that GPU storage. How can I sort through images faster, do more things with it, and really be able to get a lot of that information out faster. They're also looking at how can I bring in data preparation and that ETL offload. So instead of using the compute cycles that were expensive in the traditional data warehousing, now they're looking at how can I bring in some of the raw pieces. And again, it's all about observability and what can I do with this data faster. So think about banking, because what we want to be able to do is do real-time transactional mapping, so you can do fraud detection in real time or near real time, so you can catch those and decrease your risk in kind of your risk profile. So that's really a lot of the industries that we're seeing that are heavily, heavily benefiting from these changes in lakehouse structures.
Yeah, a lot of that really, resonates with me. we do have kind of media customers who are doing exactly what you described. Lots of legacy content sitting on tape that they can't access, and they want to transcode it, and they want to transcribe it, and they want to be able to search it. So when there's a story, when these things are relevant, they want to be able to put their hands on it immediately, because timeliness is important. And so those are some of the challenges we're working with our customers today.
Absolutely, Ben. And let's change course slightly and talk about technology evolution and use cases. Walk us through how Hitachi Vantara is evolving its Lakehouse approach, and also what role does metadata management play in enabling smarter data operations? Are you seeing customers now have a metadata strategy, or at least a need for one? And clearly, a third question for you. S3 is becoming a de facto standard and for object storage, but are you also seeing it more from an AI and data lakes perspective?
Okay, yeah, those are a lot of questions to start with. Start with the evolution. So I think, object storage is evolving as Whit described. Object storage is evolving from an archive to kind of tier one high performance storage for these Lakehouse use cases. And Hitachi, we've been in the object storage business for a long time. We've been doing data lakes and trying to do data lakehouse for a long time. And the challenge in kind of object-based data lakes is governance around structured data. It didn't really exist in the data lake before these open table formats like Iceberg and Hoodie and Delta. Schemas weren't enforced. Quality was difficult to enforce. And so that would lead to your data lake becoming a data swamp, because you really didn't know what you had. And the data set you couldn't enforce any consistency. And so the way we're addressing this is we've introduced support for Amazon S3 table buckets on our VSP1 object platform. So this is the real game changer, right? Because what it does is it turns our VSP1 object platform into a first-class Apache Iceberg table store. So the feature includes a number of capabilities. Of course, it's full Amazon S3 API compatibility. We also offer a native catalog. This is a problem that typically customers would have to solve themselves. And also we support automated table maintenance. So customers can just use their Amazon SDK to configure their maintenance policies, and we worry about the rest. So what that gives our customers is it gives them ACID compatibility on their object store. So multiple applications reading and writing the same table, so we can make sure that data remains consistent. Schemas are enforced, so you can't change the schema, but you can evolve the schema. And we support things like time travel and a lot of really cool capabilities. So what it really does is it eliminates kind of the complexity associated with Iceberg and just allows customers to just hit the ground running. And we're really excited to be the first on-premise vendor to offer support for AWS S3 table buckets. You asked about metadata, and metadata is crucial, right? It's all about metadata. Without it, the data has no context. It's unmanageable, right? You can't do data governance, and you can't do data search and discovery if you don't have good metadata. And then, of course, every object has kind of some native metadata, but it's very limited. Things like the size of the object and the object key and maybe who owns the object. But what you don't have is you need enriched metadata. You want to know more about the object, its lineage, where it came from. Is there any risk associated with that? So we're doing some interesting things in this space as well. On our VSP1 object platform, we've introduced a native PII service that as object data lands on the object store, we'll scan that for sensitive data and tag those objects if they contain sensitive data. Now, the challenge with S3 has been how do you search it? You have all this metadata, but how do you search it? And S3 didn't have an API for search. And the way that S3 has addressed this, and the way that we're addressing this in our next release, is with a feature called S3 metadata. And so this is an extension of the S3 table buckets feature. And it allows us to now put object metadata in an S3 table format that can be searched with just standard SQL. And we're also really excited that we're going to have kind of a native lightweight SQL engine for searching metadata on the object store. So you don't even need to bring your own SQL engine. You just connect over JDBC and run a SQL query. So so it enables a lot of really cool use cases, whether it's chargeback reporting or audit sensitive, data sensitivity audit reports, a lot of really cool use cases.
It sounds like you're telling me that users can avoid ETL completely. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it does allow, you to avoid some ETL because you can query data in place, right? You don't need to move data around a lot. You can, so it absolutely does give you kind of the opportunity to just kind of query that raw data. But the reality is that ETL is just part of the process. So within your object store, you're going to have kind of a raw and a curated and a published zone. And as the data moves through those zones, you're going to do some transformation and some integration. But you can do all of it in the object store.
Yeah, so Ben, I threw a lot at you there, but the third question was really about S3. Certainly, I've seen it become the de facto standard for object storage, but are you also seeing it more from an AI and data lakehouse perspective?
So the S3 API has really been kind of a game changer for object storage. We've been in object storage with Hitachi Content Platform since about 2010, at which point we introduced our own proprietary APIs. And the challenge is that every integration is a custom integration. So shortly after that, we introduced our S3 compatible API. And that really has allowed us to really kind of ramp up. And I would say today, probably 90% of our integrations are over S3. So as we look, yeah, right. So as we look for S3 table buckets and S3 metadata, what it allows us is to then quickly go forward with our partner ISVs and all of the other vendors in the marketplace that are going to support these things out of the box. And we won't have to worry about integrating or custom integrations, and we can really move quickly to solving customer problems and getting value.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives customers tremendous flexibility, right, by leveraging S3. I agree. So Ben, back to you, one more question. What's the biggest challenges that you see enterprise face from trying to activate their AI across a distributed data sources?
I think there's a couple challenges that our customers have faced historically. When you've got distributed data sources, the instinct is to copy everything into one place, right? And so there's a lot of operational overhead associated with moving the data and making the copies. Of course, now you're creating additional copies, so there's duplication all over the place. And now you've also got another area where you have governance concerns and accessibility concerns. And so that's one thing that's always been challenging is all of that duplication data movement. And then another challenge is just simply kind of resources and staffing for these big projects. Getting people to, as now these Lakehouse technologies are emerging, getting everybody up to speed, staffing for these problems, getting all the infrastructure in place, that the startup costs are pretty prohibitive. So the way we're addressing that is with our AI Data Hub as a service offering. And so that's something that combines our Hitachi infrastructure with our partners, Zetaris. They specialize in real-time data virtualization and analytics, and they have a powerful platform for query federation across a distributed data ecosystem. And then our services teams come in and they help to implement these things. And so it delivers kind of a full solution. And of course, it's delivered with our flexible kind of EverFlex pay-as-you-go consumption-based pricing model. To really give the customers an ability to get quickly started with a pay-as-you-go kind of option.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm also hearing from our customers about regulatory, right? Whether it's SEC requirements or GDPR, and making sure that they retain data for certain periods of time, or maybe not retain it, making sure they're deleting it when they're supposed to. Are we doing anything to help these customers and those types of requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we see this in India with recent changes to banking regulations that require our customers to keep logs almost on an infinite basis. And so it's a real challenge for them. These are big files. They're taking up a lot of space in the cloud. So we're working with our Hitachi Vantara partners to develop technology to convert those log files to Parquet and repatriate that data to the SP1 object. So there's some really interesting advantages by converting log data to Parquet. Parquet is a columnar format. And so because that similar data is stored together, and it makes it much more compressible. So we can compress that down to a fraction of what it would compress to in its raw format. And that has a couple of benefits. Of course, it uses less storage, and it's also a lot cheaper to repatriate. And then once you have it on object storage, instead of just having these big log files that add no value, now you can query it with our SQL engines, and you can get insights from that data. And probably more importantly, you can have trustworthy regulatory reporting, so you are audit ready with a solution like that as well.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate your insight. That's great. And I want to turn it back to Whit, bring you back into this conversation. I mean, you told us about market dynamics and some of the industry trends and approaches to Lakehouse use cases. Let me ask you two more specific questions. What is still holding back customers from deploying object storage more ubiquitously? And then two, what are some of the biggest challenges facing our customers with their Lakehouse environments?
Sure. So, as we've been talking to enterprise leaders, the primary barriers aren't about the technology itself, but they're much more about the organizations. We have tons of legacy applications that are still sitting out there, traditional things that were built around POSIX or block storage. These were kind of the old de facto standards, but now we've got applications and APIs that really start to speak S3, and they're really looking at that. The other thing that we're seeing is skills gaps. And that's always a problem in any enterprise, is keeping your people ready to go from petabyte to exabyte to just as much data as you can be able to throw at it. And so that also changes kind of the skills gap inside there. And then also kind of the perception versus reality of object store. The perception was it was slow, wasn't great for storing things, and how do I store all my data there? And again, as we've been talking, I'm going to kind of amplify a lot of the things Ben's been said. With these newer standards and protocols, what we're seeing is, yes, I can store my data. I've got good metadata. I can find it. I can query it. Because back in the old days when we were trying to find things in an S3 bucket and we were using Athena, it was painfully slow. Now we're starting to get better, faster query engines that are allowing us to really start to use these data lakes as then a real repository that we can start to have enterprises use. So that's those are the three big things that we're seeing from customers in terms of how do they even get started and what's the problem, kind of the blocks to deployment. Now, David, the next question you asked me was some of the biggest challenges. Well, again, I want to amplify what Ben said about data governance. I came out of some of the data governance world, and it used to be a lot of manual processes, and how do I know where my golden records were, and who was in charge of that, and where is this? And now we're really getting some really good, strong applications and good frameworks for data governance. And so getting out of that data swamp into a well-governed data lake and data lakehouse is really starting to bring out some of those best things in terms of business and getting that going. The other big thing is cost management. And now if I'm storing data all the way across my corporation or my enterprise, I'm storing it in different locations because I have different data sovereignty rules, different data types. I'm looking at different locations, and I don't want to restore that data all over the place. I want to know exactly where my data sits, because if I have to duplicate it other than my gold, silver, and bronze locations for analytics and reporting, that costs are going to start to spin out of, even though storage is cheap, those costs are going to start to spin out of control because I need to be able to have that well managed. And then finally, we're also looking at performance tuning, because lakehouses are a complicated problem. It's not just that storage system, but it's also networking. It's my query engine, and I need to be able to put it in table formats like Iceberg. And again, some of the other things that we're looking at, being able to put those in and figure out where my performance bottlenecks are really kind of helps then manage that ecosystem. And then as I'm looking at, not only multi-cloud, but neo clouds and other places where I'm also doing other, high intensity data workloads, that really helps then manage that performance, being able to feed those processes and getting my data to the right systems at the right time, being able to do the right things. And so I don't have a lot of that, that performance, being able to push it out over the network, bring it back in, which is slow, having it in one location and being able to pull those insights from wherever the data is stored really kind of then makes a big difference for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the performance challenges, right? There are some times where the time to first byte is the most critical. And there's other times where, hey, I just need to make sure that I'm being able to write a large amount of data, right? Looking at throughput requirements. You have some workloads are very small object driven, where others are large objects, right? So the flexibility of a storage solution to be able to meet those different performance challenges in a changing AI infrastructure is definitely important for our customers. So let's shift a little bit to looking forward. Let's Whit, I'll ask you a couple of questions as far as going forward in the trends. What innovation or trends should businesses be watching over the next 12 to 18 months in this space?
So, from our forward looking perspective, I've got three areas that we want to talk about. So, the first one is computational storage, and it's all about pushing that compute capabilities closer to the data, like we were talking about, keeping those costs down. I want to be able to analyze, do AI, serve up that data to whatever platforms are using it, and being able to bring it in quickly. So, that computational storage, bringing that computational component of whatever I'm doing, whether it's analytics or AI, deeper there. The second thing that we're seeing is those open standards, right? Especially around S3 and that S3 API, the Apache Iceberg becoming that default standard for Lakehouse. And we're really starting to see those. We're also seeing things like Cozy, which is object storage interface for Kubernetes. That's really starting to become mature, mainstream, because as more enterprises are taking their workloads and moving them to Kubernetes containers for scaling up and scaling down, we're really seeing a lot of that. And then finally, AI for data management, that AI ops. We're seeing a lot of enterprises and vendors starting to look at how can I leverage AI to kind of help me filter through the noise and find the right signal. So as I'm starting to manage my data workloads, I'm starting to do other things. How can I use the really great, amazing things that we're doing now with LLMs? We're also doing it with, AI models. How can I use that for predictive analytics to help me kind of forecast my capacity needs? Where's my data going? Do I have performance hotspots? What are the things that I need to be able to do to intelligently manage my data across my enterprise platform? Those are the kinds of things that we're really seeing. And also AI is becoming really, really good at helping us manage data types like David, you and Ben have been talking about. Things like data sovereignty. Am I keeping the data that's Canadian data needs to stay in Canada? My German data needs to stay within the EU borders. How can I make sure that that's right? And I'm also looking at then regulatory and compliance. Can I leverage AI to help me with, PCI data, HIPAA data, PII information, or GDPR, or any of the other standards that are coming around the world? That smart data integration and that AI on top of my data management is starting to make a huge difference in terms of, if you're thinking about an enterprise, it's starting to make it easier to manage the data and manage the applications that are using the data and starting to bring those two things together.
Excellent. And one last question for you, Whit. Do you see the lakehouses, as we've talked about it today, becoming the default architecture for AI-driven enterprises?
I do, because, AI doesn't just need big data, it's now needing vast data. I need huge, vast quantities of data and all kinds of data to be able to train those, whether I'm looking at a vision model, whether I'm looking at a video model, whether I'm looking at text or in the good old fashioned days of sentiment analysis. Are my customers happy? Are they upset? Market basket analysis. I need to be able to look at all of my data across all of my workloads and workflows to be able to really take that. And to be able to do this, I need to be able to use that structured and unstructured and semi-structured data into a single platform. And so this ecosystem of having a lakehouse and some of these things, I really see this is now becoming the de facto standard going forward. And I'm sure it'll be replaced by something in another 5, 10 years. But for right now, I think it's some of the best things that we've got. Companies like Spark and Trino and Databricks and Snowflake, they've got a rich landscape of integrations that they're putting on top of these smart lakehouse applications to be able to give customers better access to data so that I get better analytics, I get better AI, I get better things with my cleaned, curated, well understood, well governed data and the rich metadata around it. And I really think it's that lakehouse thinking that's going to give organizations the ability to do this.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And it's really about customers being able to get value from their data. There's a tremendous amount of data that they're storing. How do they leverage it and to get value out of it and help drive their business forward? So Ben, to you from a futures perspective, what's next for Hitachi Vantara in this space? What are you seeing? What's some exciting developments?
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting things going on, and it's an exciting time. I think to Whit's point, AI and ML is really pushing us all to kind of think differently about storage and and particularly around analytics use cases. So one very interesting thing. So we're working with our Hitachi Advanced Database team in Japan. They've been in market for about 10 years in the Japanese market. They have a high performance SQL engine that's got patented parallel query execution technology. And they're integrating it with our file and object storage. So it's they've got a great block solution, but they're evolving with us into open table format support across across file and object, and also introducing Iceberg support. So we're going to have our own SQL engine that's purpose built for scale on object on VSP1 object. So that's pretty exciting. We're building data lakehouse reference architectures that combine not just our object storage, but both object, block, file storage solutions with our servers and some of our third-party ISV partners like Zetaris, like this HADB solution, or bring your own ISV to deliver kind of lakehouse infrastructure solutions that are easy for our customers to consume and that they know will work and work at scale and perform predictably. So we're pretty excited about that. And then, of course, leaning into kind of AI and ML, Amazon recently announced S3 vectors, which is really interesting to deliver kind of vector database capabilities to the object storage. Really interesting technology, something we're excited about, something we're planning for. So I think just watch this space and you're going to hear more from Hitachi Vantara about S3 vectors. So it's an exciting time to be kind of in storage and watch how this is all evolving.
That's right. Victor, let's go.
See Clarence.
All right, in closing, I really want to thank everybody for joining our webinar today. For anybody who would like to learn more about Hitachi Vantara, we included a couple of QR codes. You can get more information about the GigaOM report that we referenced today. We can learn more about VSP1 object solutions, as well as our Everflex capabilities. If customers don't want to manage their infrastructure, we have that capability today, and that's certainly part of our repertoire. You could also visit your partner, your Hitachi Vantara partner, or HitachiVantara.com. Thanks for your time today.